How did you find attracting talent in those really early stages?
I'm not willing to sit here and say everything's my fault because I'm the business leader and therefore I take ultimate responsibility.
I've tried, and to be honest, I don't feel comfortable doing it, and it's not my kind of niche.
I think fundamentally Drag and I tried to cover our own shortfallings in the form of a junior person. It was a completely oversubscribed role that they had no chance of succeeding in whatsoever.
I think we just create an environment here that people actually want to come to work.
It's actually been quite easy for us. We've just had to be authentic to who we are. We don't have our values up on the wall screaming at everybody saying, aren't we this? They know what we are because we live and breathe in our actions what we are. Hello and welcome back to the Scale Up, where we talk all things growing our business. I'm Jack and I'm joined today by Sam and Drag, and we're going to be talking about finding the right talent. Before we get into that, we're just going to have a little bit of a catch up, and Drag's going to explain to everybody why he's missed his flight to Macedonia.
Oh, yeah, lovely, yeah. So I was supposed to go to Macedonia. When was it? It's meant to be 3rd of April. Got it all booked, ready, and then my wife goes, just make sure you book us in, obviously, the day before. So booked us all in, got to my little boy's kind of passport, check in, passport expiring soon. And I'm like, are you joking? And then my little boy Louis, he's in the shower and he's like loving it. He's like happy, singing along. You should have seen him. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what are we going to say to him? I was like, Joan, can I have a quick word? I showed it to her and she goes, how did we do that? How did we miss that? And I remember thinking to myself, what do you mean we? There is no we in this. It's like, you're the one who did the passports, not me.
You passed the buck straight away.
No, but I didn't. I picked my argument. I thought, I'm not going to do it. I actually picked my battles.
Well, you haven't now. She's going to watch this.
That's a good point. So hopefully I won't need to show it to her. She won't watch it. It'll be fine. Yeah, so then I had to cancel my flights. My kids were absolutely devastated. But
you did treat them to a nice weekend away in Teignmouth.
Yeah, not as glamorous as going to a hot country, no.
It's not a particularly happy ending, is it? You just straight up missed the flight. So I still don't know why you didn't get an emergency passport or something. You can do that.
Well, no, you can't. Like, I actually looked at this on the same night. You can do it for adults. So you can literally do 24 hours the way before you can do, but you can't do children. And plus, to rebook it, my kids have actually said, why didn't we just get another flight? Because we had to lie to them and say, oh, the flights were cancelled. They had an issue with the flight. So Sammy or Louie's like, would you get another one? I went, yes, we can get another one, but it's Easter and it's all booked up. I try to think on the spot. I'm like, what can I say?
Next thing you know, he's going to be on EasyJet.
He's like, found a ticket. Damn it.
We went away instead. So yeah, it's a bit of a sad ending. You ended up just working for 2 weeks in England, but me and Sam went away to Portugal and got some sun. That's why we're looking a bit more tan than you. But
yeah,
had a good time, didn't we, Sam?
Yeah, good enough.
Was it good enough? I heard it was a bit of a...
Golf's never really fun, is it?
Well, was it rainy one day, wasn't it?
Oh, it monsooned one day, yeah. It was literally, we were like putting on flooded greens. Like the ball just wouldn't roll. It was practically floating.
Yeah.
Sorry?
So who won out of you lot?
Out of all of us?
Yeah.
Don't know. I think it might be you, wasn't it?
Yeah, potentially.
Jack played the best 9 I've seen him play on Pride Del Rey.
Yeah. I saved it all for Portugal.
Save it for the pristine golf course and driving wins.
Real deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did catch a bit of sun. Not as much as we wanted to, but a bit.
Yeah.
But no, it was a good trip. It was a good trip.
Was it?
Nice break for us around just after Easter, wasn't it? But yeah, I don't think Sam's team were too happy with him going away on that time because
yeah,
the big onboarding that you let your team deal with, didn't you?
Let them deal with. That's a bit harsh, isn't it? Yeah, so the good news is that we onboarded Youth Connect Southwest. It's always a bit like weird for me personally because I hardly meet the clients. I don't really get involved in that initial stage, but it is often like I have quite a lot to do with in the background. So it is a massively rewarding thing when it goes as well as it did. And obviously Neil's been massive in driving that through and making the process go as well as it has from a client liaison perspective and from just a project management perspective, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm usually not too involved, but I did get to meet kind of Nick, Liam, Sam and the team there throughout the kind of tender process. And yeah, they're just a great bunch of people that are doing some really good work in the community. So being able to be trusted with that kind of opportunity to come in and actually move them away from Baines and onto their own infrastructure, make them an independent organisation and give them that really good level of IT is really rewarding. It's not often that we get to work with a charity in the Southwest that, you know, are a decent size and we can really support them in what they're doing. But it's been a lot of work for the team, and yeah, like you say, Neil spearheading that with Dave and Alex and Nath, and working over the weekend to ensure minimal downtime, most efficiency and stuff. It's really nice. It must be nice for you to be able to go away and go, actually, those guys have really stepped up there. And
yeah, I think obviously going away is one aspect, and like not having to be technically involved is great. But I think the biggest takeaway from me is how far our service proposition has come in the space of the last 12, 18 months. Like, if we had taken on that opportunity 18 months ago, we would have been on-premise, Active Directory, group policy does everything you need, Intune, probably not yet. And it would have been a very, very different setup to the one that they've ended up with, which wouldn't have matched their organization requirements in the way that we've managed to in this instance. So I think the takeaway for me is like, okay, we've built a brand new account this way. And a big thing for us over the next 3 to 5 years is transitioning all of the accounts that we have into that modern workplace way of working.
Yeah.
We've proved straight away that it works. They, you know, we've built a company overnight.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, it's like building it from scratch, which is quite rare. You normally take on a client, and whether you take on a client which is either it's been looked after well by the previous IT company or it hasn't looked after well. And this was like a clean slate. Doesn't matter what their estate was like. I remember receiving like 90 laptops. We're like, when are we doing this? Like, oh, doing it on the weekend. I'm like, oh, okay. Because we're doing Exchange migration, we're doing SharePoint migration, and we're doing laptop rebuilds. And I'm like, wow, all that in a weekend. So
Yeah.
all of us obviously did it together. But it's nice what you said, Sam, that you can actually put in all our policies from the outset, which is quite rare. You can't really do it on a new client, because then as soon as you start putting new policies in, things go wrong. You can't really troubleshoot what you've done to their estate because you know how it's been built. But yeah, it's good starting it from scratch, I thought.
Yeah, and it's, you know, for me, it's a blueprint of how modern IT should be done. I'm proud that we as a business have managed to facilitate that, because there's a lot of legwork that's gone behind the scenes in order for us to be able to roll that out for a client.
It's a massive contract for us. They're a sizable organisation. They're doing fantastic things in the community. And, you know, from their perspective, I think they're making a great decision coming across now where we can really support them operationally to grow to that next level for them. I know they have plans to expand even further across the Southwest. So it's just an exciting time. It's kept us all busy. But, you know, when you say good busy, that's the kind of good busy that we want to achieve as a business. So yeah, massive win. And as I say, thank you to their team and thank you to our team for ensuring that smooth transition. And yeah, just look forward to working with them going forward.
Yeah, and like we said, an honourable mention to Baines, who traditionally you work with people in public sector organisations and it can be quite bureaucratic and cumbersome, but their team from start to finish was fantastic in dealing with the migration, and genuinely think credit to public services.
Yeah.
So shall we discuss the main topic then, finding the right talent? I mean, I'll start with a question to you both really, which is, how did you find attracting talent in those really early stages?
Well, I think the early stage is probably a lot easier than it is now, which also we can touch upon in a minute. We use quite a lot of our own kind of connections where we worked with previous kind of engineers. That was kind of an easy one back in the day. Say back in the day when we first started, it was a lot easier to find talent because it's people you work with. Those are the ones you would kind of go to first. I don't know how you found that, Sam. Do you agree when you look at the people you've worked with, you would probably recommend them first, wouldn't you? You work with them, trust them.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a rule of life is like attracts like, and I would like to think that I'm pretty good at what I do and that I have certain attributes that enable me to be the way I am, same as you do, and that that's why we have a relationship. So, you know, over the course of the last 10, 15 years in this industry, we've come across people who are that way inclined also, and you've formed relationships that have lasted outside of just the jobs you're immediately in. And when you start a business, for us, those people came flocking back, would be the way that I would put it.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say the problem is when you exhausted that.
Yeah,
isn't it?
absolutely.
We
And then
get
it
to the
becomes a
point.
whole different question. But
Yeah.
I think for, our average listener who's trying to scale their business and trying to get things going, like, your family will be similar to you, your friends will be similar to you. I still speak to friends now who I would offer jobs to in a heartbeat, even though they don't even do IT. They just are the right kind of people who I know, if I tell them to put a curtain pole up, they'll put a curtain pole up.
Would it be straight though?
Probably not.
I mean, yeah, from the looking in at that stage, it looked like you actually had probably more opportunity with people than you did job roles, and you were kind of trying to create job roles maybe to find that right talent and get them in at the door.
Yeah, I think especially like just outside of that initial growth hurdle, but that just outside of that initial one, there's never right place, right time. You're never going to be in a situation where someone that you want to work with is out of work just at the exact time that you have an opportunity available. So if you're a growing organization that's in that mid phase, my advice would be employ before you need to, and employ when you stumble across the right talent. I think the expression that we've used in the past is we always have a job opening for the right person.
Yeah, definitely. And what did you kind of get right and wrong in those early stages? And I'm talking right back then, not kind of now, and the problems that we might have with attracting talent now, but in those early stages, is there anything that kind of stood out to you, or is it quite an easy process of you had a bigger pool because you had just come out of employment, you've got a wide range of connections, but there's also, surely they were taking risks and all of those things coming across. So what were the challenges in that stage?
I think when it's just being Sam originally, obviously when you try to go to get a new business, they won't take you seriously if it's just literally two of you. So as soon as we got a business, we employed our first person, wasn't it? And I think he didn't come from another IT company, did he?
No.
So that wasn't like an easy one. There wasn't much of a kind of a risk there, I don't think anyway. It's more, I thought, the sales process where, whether it's our fault for not explaining the exact process, where the person had to come in and just basically try and do cold calling sales, which I've tried, and to be honest, I don't feel comfortable doing it, and it's not my kind of niche. I think our failings on that was probably mainly not being quite descriptive of what the job would be. I just pick up the phone, and just start calling. But she was kind of all up for doing. But then do you not find that was a bit awkward when it got to the stage where it wasn't doing what it should have been doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because that person's probably going to watch this, and I still really, really like the person, and they just wanted to be part of the organization, regardless of what they were doing in it, and the role that we had was a specific role that wasn't well suited for them. And at that time, even though they were the right kind of person, even though we should have moved heaven and earth to keep them, we just couldn't, because it would have been completely oversubscribing ourselves at that point in time.
But that also goes to what I think that was partly our fault. That's what I'm saying is.
Yeah, I do think it's our fault. I agree. But I also think that if you outline to someone what they're going to be doing and they say, I'm up for that, and it doesn't work, I'm not willing to sit here and say everything's my fault because I'm the business leader and therefore I take ultimate responsibility. My job is to make it clear what your role will be. And if you don't like that,
did that
role,
happen?
Yeah. I feel like there was an accurate description, and fundamentally they wanted to stay in the organization, but they didn't want to do the role that we had for them.
No.
And we didn't have another role that we could have purposed them in. So unfortunately, that was just the way that relationship went in the end. And right now, would I employ them again? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I wouldn't employ them in sales, but I would 100% employ them again.
Yeah.
But they've moved on to bigger and better things because they are a capable individual who's got the world at their feet.
I agree.
So, in those early stages, is it about being clear on the role, or, what's the kind of, regardless of the specific person?
Yeah. So there's a wider point. I think clear communication, yeah. What do you need? How do you need it done? And let people make their own decisions. And that comes with an element of risk. And I don't think whether something goes the way that you wanted to or not means that you were right or wrong. I just think that sometimes the world doesn't align in the way that you need it to. And that there's no learning there. But I would prefer to take a risk and give someone a chance and let them work it out than I would prefer to err on the side of caution every single time and make sure that, unless we try something and we have 100% success rate, we failed.
I just found it easier when you ask that question. It depends on the industry. So if it's an IT engineer, because we worked with those people before, it was kind of an easy one. It's like you just slot in. But because it's sales and we're not a sales background kind of people anyway, and you're expecting this person to generate their own kind of leads from nowhere, and here you are, you've come in, you've accepted this job offer to basically get new business. Here you are, go off and get it, and we can help. We did actually say we give you any tools you want, but I do think having that person is completely different to an IT person, where they're self-sufficient. An IT person is just like, we've worked with them, we know they're good, they slot them in and they just work.
Yeah, I mean, I know this isn't the topic of this conversation that you're having, but I think fundamentally Drag and I tried to cover our own shortfallings in the form of a junior person. Yeah. And it was a completely oversubscribed role that they had no chance of succeeding in whatsoever.
Yeah.
And we didn't evaluate the plausibility of what we were asking them to do. We've paid people 2-3 times the amount we paid him to do that job and they failed.
Yeah, I think that's when I listen to you both there. I think that would be my summarization is, you can go down and pick a specific person that didn't work or so on, but actually what looks like overriding to me is that you knew what you wanted from an IT engineer, but you didn't know what you wanted from somebody outside of your skill set. Not only did you not know what you wanted, but also you didn't have a network in that area. So, in summary, there's a level of it. If you have a network, use it, make the role specific, but maybe there's external people that you could have sought advice from at that stage to say, I want to solve this pain point, but I don't have expertise in that role or what that needs to be or what level that person has to be coming in. Did you speak to anybody outside of the organization at that time?
To be honest, I think it came down to cost, wasn't it? When we're first starting up, you try to keep cost down as much as possible, and it's just us two, and then you obviously get a third person in and then a fourth, and then to get someone of that kind of stature, you're talking a lot of money. Which we didn't have at that point.
And we did go out to market and we did ask for advice on, what earnings you'd expect and so on.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the same as what we expect it to be now. And as a 3-person startup, probably not going to be practical. But they're just growth hurdles that you got. And if I'm honest, looking back at that time, my strategy on sales now would be, I think that I looked at it as, right, what book can I read? What process can I bring in? And, metric driven stuff that arguably is for those kind of bigger organizations. And in reality, if you were like, Sam, you need to make 5 sales this year, what are you going to do? I would answer that question so differently. And I would use my personal connections down to friends, family, reaching out to the businesses they work in. I would attempt to grow it in a lot more creative way than just employing someone and saying, hey, look, can you do this for me?
If you have to do it all over again, what would you change differently?
Specifically attracting talent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably would take more responsibility myself for things that are practically out of my wheelhouse as such.
Like what?
Like sales.
Sales, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's easier for me to say now that I'm older. But yeah, I think at that point I thought, I'll just employ someone to do that. And in reality, it was a complete poison chalice. There was no way they were going to succeed. And, fundamentally, I think we probably did some damage to their life that is irresponsible of us.
Or their confidence of.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine it probably is something that still eats them now, in the way that it didn't get nasty or acrimonious or anything, but it was just like, he fundamentally is a lovely person, and it did get a little bit messy towards the end. And I feel like we put too much responsibility on too narrow shoulders.
I don't want to stray specifically in sales and marketing. I think the point here is that if you're going to put out a job role and you're going to attract talent, you can't expect to unleash that talent if you're not clear on what role they are, if that's a fair role to them and what they can achieve in that business.
Yeah, and ultimately you need a director who's going to be driving that part of the business.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a leader in that part of the business, recruiting in it isn't going to work for you.
Yeah,
and you're better
that's
off
the
just
point.
not having it.
Yeah.
As to whether we got anything wrong with recruiting techs, like, I think the reason that we're not talking about it is because we actually did pretty well.
Yeah.
We used our personal networks, and I would say more than anything, they used their personal networks rather than we used them. And we were just inundated with, when are you guys going to have a job role for the first 3.5, 4 years?
I want to leave.
Yeah.
Please employ me.
Which is amazing, really, when you consider the fact that we're an organic startup, the fact that you wouldn't have had above market rate salaries to chuck at people, big benefit package, all of those things that come with some, of the more funded startups, to be able to attract people out of secure jobs. No job is secure necessarily, but being able to have people knock on your door who are experienced engineers, who are well sought off on the market when you're only a year, two into the business, you must have been doing something really well. What does that come back to?
Well, the thing is, I remember the first person we employed, he wasn't working in IT anyway, so that was kind of, we approached that person. And the other probably 4 or 5, they came to us. There wasn't like, and we didn't even need them at that point, was it? We thought we were going to grow, and then an opportunity came, and then we thought, let's just take it. I know we're not going to be able to do it for long, but then we thought, that's when we're going to grow. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I think status is everything in that situation. I think you already have a reputation. They already know what you're about. They already know what you're going to be creating because, you're clear in communicating your morals, your ethos, and you're obviously going to build a company in that image. So I think as long as you've got, a tune that they want to march to, happy days. Your issue is going to be attracting people that don't know what the tune is, I guess.
Yes, certainly. And I think, I guess that's why you were so successful in that stage, is that you had that level of pool of people where, they already knew what you were about, and it wasn't about the BZB brand necessarily. It was about you two as individuals and your brand and what they wanted to get on board with. But I certainly think if anybody's watching here and I think they would probably be sat there saying, not that you were lucky because you were in the industry, but that's probably quite a unique position to be in, where people are willing to leave jobs to go and join a startup at such an early age. And that's probably made a massive difference to how you're able to perform on those early accounts. So I guess what we're saying in summary is attracting talent is hard, but using your personal network and using their network as well. Like you said, it's not just your friends and family. It can be your friend's friend or your friend's family or whatever. The circles are going to be similar, but leaning into that rather than going out to the wider market when you don't have a brand to pull against and you don't have big salaries and remuneration packages to pull against is actually a really good way to get good people in at those early stages.
I think you've had the same about itself. Like, you knew like your ex kind of boss, his son wanted a job, and then you thought, let's give it a go, and it's worked out really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the latest stuff that I've got involved with, I would say exactly the same thing, that some of our most successful people here are people that, that we've known before, but also just people that we've given their break to, and taking a little bit of risk of where they might have come from. We've got a chap that used to work in a bike shop that's now fantastic technician for us, but as he took a gamble, we took a risk, and it's worked really well.
Yeah, so I think in those initial phases, we essentially just hired people that we knew, and we were really lucky that we had massive amounts of confidence in the fact that they could just deliver from the moment they got in the chair. And that was a massive luxury for us that most people aren't afforded. And I know that some people will confuse that with luck, but I think it's just like we've earned that position through the status that we hold. And that is a hard-earned status. People trust us to deliver for them. And I think the fact that we have people still here 4 or 5 years later shows that they were right to trust us and that we continue to deliver that now. I think, like, to move the conversation on a little bit, it'd be interesting to talk about how we grow out of that phase and what efforts we've taken to actually stop recruiting outside of what we know, because that's kind of dried up to some degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I first came in, and when we were looking at job roles at that stage, I think what you said to me, Sam, is we've got to start using recruiters, and we've got to start going to external agencies, and we've got to start trying to attract talent outside of our pool, because it's starting to dry up a little bit. I mean, I think we probably had a bit of that, but there's also still been a side of our networks continue to grow, our brand has continued to grow, new people coming in, know other people, and we've still tried to heavily lean into that because we have found the most success with that. But there were points in the journey now where, particularly later on in the journey, where we've had to go to external agencies and we've had to look outside of our immediate pool because either they weren't ready to move, or we didn't know enough people, or whatever it might have been.
And how did you find dealing with recruitment agencies in general? Like, did you find they added value to the process? Did you find we were competitive in what we were offering?
Yeah, good question. I think for me, using outside agencies like recruiters is they definitely have their pros, but they also have cons, particularly with the business that we're trying to build. I think they do a lot of the legwork for you in terms of finding that talent. They're obviously always on the lookout, and if you go out with a job ad now, you're going to get X amount of people, but there is probably more people in roles that might not look and apply at that ad, but would be persuaded with the right company that recruiters can have push in that message to people. But I think if I'm being honest with the success that we've had, the only real success we've had from recruitment is in specialist roles, whereas using internal channels in more mainstream roles like engineers and that kind of thing has been much more successful for us. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think one of the biggest points that we pointed out a few weeks back was you can't take risk anymore not anymore, but risk if you are using recruiters because of the fees that you're paying.
Yeah, I think like we obviously, and I know we probably will get into this later on, but we spoke about how to evaluate candidates in that interview process, in how they conduct themselves throughout the recruitment process. Then you can tell a lot by how responsive they are, their grammar, and what expectations they have, how amenable they are, the flexibility they show. All of those things like essentially shows you a snippet of how they're going to work with you over time. And a recruiter does definitely shield you from that, right?
Yeah, that's a massive thing for me. I'd like to pick up on all those small, what are red flags to me, because a half an hour interview, whatever way you do it, you're not going to get a great deal of information about that true person's nature, because it's just a stressful environment for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're a great candidate, you're still not going to see their true colors. You're not going to see how great they are in that interview because of the environment that you're in. So the little exchanges, the covering letter, have they completely written their CV via AI and not put any effort in? Is it a complete formatting mess? All of those things are taken away from you because a recruiter is obviously going through those things, and you're just presented with a person on interview day, and you've got to try and work all of that out. So it does make it harder in your decision making as well. It does take the admin out, but some of that admin's quite key to assessing the person.
I think it's a massive risk. Not massive risk. It's a bigger risk than people obviously and trust. I find that with recruiters, that when someone gives you a CV, here you are, interview the person. I don't know how you feel this, Sam. They can be great on their CV. You interview them, they could sound great, and then you employ them, even though they've answered all the questions correctly in your interview stage. And then when they actually come work for you, it's not the same person as what was in the interview stage.
Well,
did you find that?
True, but I don't necessarily think that's a flaw in recruiters. I think that's a flaw in interview in general and how we evaluate candidates as an economic picture. But one of the big things for me with recruiters is if you're upfronting 20% of the candidate's salary with no clawback agreement or very limited provisions for a clawback, the entirety of the risk of that recruitment is now on you. And it takes away your ability to just go, we want a mobile workforce in the UK. We want people to be able to just take their skills, try and move them onto other businesses, contribute in loads of different areas. And when you end up having to pay such a huge amount of money up front, you become a lot more analytical over the small amount of information you have, i.e. an interview, about whether that person's going to be right. So the rejection rate for candidates has to be so much higher than the kind of suck it and see, well, what's the worst that will happen? We both need to get to know each other. Do you want to give this a go or not? Approach of how
It's a
I think
shared
recruitment should be.
responsibility model,
Literally,
isn't
yeah.
it?
And that economically, we need to find a different way to do that to see whether they're a good fit for your organization. But a 20% recruitment fee with no clawback provision absolutely puts pay to that.
There's already ego involved from the hiring person on somebody they've hired, even if they've come through internal channels. I've massively found that myself, trying to make something work that maybe isn't working, or not picked up on red flags, or not been honest with you both about performance in certain areas in the past of people, because you don't want to have got it wrong. But that's massively amplified when you've got a 20% fee on the line as well. It's hard enough anyway.
Yeah.
But when you're also now saying, by the way, I've also cost us a near fortune for it, puts a lot of pressure, and it puts a lot of wedge between radical truth and what's actually kind of happening.
Yeah, but I find that if you didn't go down that journey, you wouldn't know that now. So now you've been through that kind of journey. You're thinking, I'm not going to keep going down this route because it's not working as it should be working.
And that's the whole point of this podcast,
Yeah.
because we want to share what we've learned.
Yeah.
There's no silver bullet.
Yeah. And look, we sound like we're nagging on recruiters a little bit, but it's just saying, in our experience,
And your DMs are about to get flooded with recruiters saying, we're different.
Dragisa Matovski.
Dragista. It's like a barista kind of drink. I like it. You actually made a good point, by the way. You said if you had a recruitment agency yourself and you started up from scratch, you'd do it completely differently.
Well, no.
No,
I
not
don't.
differently. No, in a sense of what you would
Again,
say.
you're going to tell them how to
We're
do their
not
job.
negging on recruiters. I'm sure they're very good at what they do.
No,
I just, for me personally, I think that, I run a business. I'm not very good at evaluating whether someone's going to be good at their job or not. That's not my job. That's why I've outsourced it to a recruiter, right? So I outsource it to a recruiter who's going to help me find and evaluate and place a person, okay? And then they place all of the risk on me. So if it were me, my clawback provisions in my agreement would be heavily weighted towards, if they leave in the first month, I'll give you it all back. If they leave in the second month, I only give you 50% back. If they leave after 3 months, that's on you. But at the moment, the clawback provisions on the contracts we've signed have been a week before we start.
They go down pretty rapidly. Even that's quite rapid. I mean, I'd like to see something that says, I'll give you all of your money back for 6 months.
It then flips for me from my priority is placing someone and persuading you that they're the right person and me trotting off into the sun, to I need to find you the right person so that I get my fee in 6 months. And even if your fees are double, whatever.
But the point there is that you'll have a continued relationship with that employer. And look, I don't want to stray into start giving recruiters advice. I think we're just trying to give a little bit of knowledge from the employer's side of what could help us.
Yeah, I didn't do that. He did that.
And that is Dragisa Matovski, as I say, Dragisa Matovski.
Love it.
At bzbit.co.uk.
You can find him here at bzbit. I think the other thing from my side, last point on that is, I think, being, as I said before, being a startup, it's difficult to start putting compensation packages together and benefit packages and all those things together that are really going to pull top talent out of their current jobs. And I think that's really difficult, whether it's us or recruiters, whoever it is, to be able to do. So, if they're not coming to you directly because they understand your brand or because they've got a personal connection and they've just been told, here's a job role, I would say it's less likely, just percentage-wise, that they're going to be top talent, and more likely that they're going to be underperforming in their roles or job hopping, and you're not going to keep them for long because they're just more that way inclined and more susceptible to this random role that's come up than
Yeah, I mean, I think you sell them the dream and you take them with you. But you've got to have a dream and you've got to have the desire to take people with you. So ultimately, someone coming to a startup with low pay in the form of no funding, massive breadth in their job responsibilities, massive pressure, it doesn't sound like the most appealing proposition. Yeah, without all the other,
without even knowing you or your brand. Like,
exactly.
I'm not saying for a minute we're underpaying or anything like that. It's just you're not going in there like headhunter style.
No, but
and going,
you
"We're
are
gonna-"
for the first.
That's what
Well,
I'm
at the
saying.
very
Yeah.
beginning, yeah.
You don't have those funds.
No.
Like,
Yeah.
you just can't compete on those basis, and you are asking people to, take the punt, and I'll see it right.
Yeah.
And
Which is an interesting point.
but you've got to put it right when you get the opportunity to. We share our accounts with all of the business. Everyone knows what we do, how we do it.
Yeah.
We're transparent, and we make sure that people are included on our journey.
Yeah. So that's kind of discussing attracting the talent in those kind of stages. When you have found the right talent and you kind of, or you have a pool of candidates, let's say, what does a good interview structure look like, or what does an assessment of whether, particularly if you do have a pool of people, how are you going to assess them against each other? How do you kind of get to the point where you're able to say, yeah, let's go ahead with this?
Yeah, well, I think competency-based interviews are definitely the best way to go.
No, it's true. I actually agree with you.
No, you agree with me?
No, do you know why? I'll tell you the reason why. Because when we used to work together years and years ago, you wrote a kind of a competency kind of set of questions.
Oh, no, yeah, but the competency specifically means, like, I was taking the mick because where Jack used to work, a competency-based interview would be something like, please tell me about a time that you've shown great leadership ability.
Yeah, but that's just rubbish.
Well, no, but that's what a competency interview is.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is like a technical exam within an interview. And I didn't create it, actually. I got it from an old mentor when I was younger, who worked for a massive network infrastructure company. And he gave me their interview questions and was like, I would use these if I were you. And I'd got them because my old boss asked me to get them for him. And then I gave him I think it was about 20 or 30 questions.
Yeah,
20.
Yeah.
And he took it, flicked for it, he went, I don't know the answers to any of these. And I went, yeah, and you're not an engineer.
Were they really technical?
Yeah.
That role,
okay.
though, they were technical for that specific role, and it was like a third line role.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't do that for like a first line or kind of a second line to a
Yeah.
point. It was like high level.
I guess I know Sam was being sarcastic at the start, but I suppose this is the question. Do you make your interview more relaxed, trying to get to know the person, their behaviors, their competencies, or are you trying to go, actually, I just want to know how well you can do this job from a technical place? Because, both have the pros and cons. It springs to mind, particularly on the technical side, is they might not know what technology we're using, but doesn't mean they can't pick that up in a very short space of time if they know another technology. So are you looking for the behavior that they have shown in terms of learning technology, or are you looking for them to specifically know what technology you're using?
I don't do, obviously, the interviews. You do it more than I do, Sam. The first thing I would look for is personality. Do they fit kind of our ethos? That's the first thing I look at. Do they fit our kind of, I know it's quite hard to get it from the first kind of hour, half an hour. That's the most important, the most important part is getting their kind of personality across. If they can fit in our culture. If they don't, they could be amazing at IT. If they don't fit in our culture, there's no point in you coming over because you're not going to fit with the rest of the people. That's, from my perspective, that's the kind of number one. They have to fit our kind of culture, similar kind of personalities. The technology side, that's obviously dependent on the role. But what do you think, Sam?
I think you're right. If I'm honest about my own performance in interviews, I've often erred towards the personality side. And are they going to be a good fit? Do we have a good rapport? Are they, what I would class as like a human being that I would want some form of relationship with, really. But I've been done twice, 3 times on people who just don't have the ability level that they're prescribing to have.
We've actually had to take Sam out of interviews. It's mainly just me now.
You're not allowed
Is that because you?
Sam's got it wrong too many times now.
Yeah, okay.
He's got 3 strikes.
It's making too much pressure on them at the interview stage where they're nervous wreck answering these 20 questions.
I mean,
I can't do this. I only applied to be a cleaner.
I think, yeah. After I cooked so many people in the beginning with technical questions, I've now steered towards no technical questions, which has also cooked me instead. But yeah, I mean, I do think it's a blend of both. I think that you need to make sure that they're the right fit organizationally for your business. And you could set the cat amongst the pigeons, bringing in talent that isn't a good fit for your business. It can very quickly poison your organization, and it can be very difficult to get that back. So if you don't have a strong culture and you recruit wrong, you could be in for a world of pain.
I just find it that you can teach someone IT. You can't teach them kind of a personality to be.
Yeah,
That's
but
completely different.
teaching IT takes 4, 5, 6 years
Depends-
to get
depends
to
on the
that
role.
top level. Of
Yeah.
course it does.
Yeah.
You know, if you're recruiting for an entry level role, it's all about personality.
Yeah.
It's all about aptitude. It's all about how receptive are you? How much do you want it? All of those questions, absolutely. But if you start using those same criteria for third line projects, whatever,
Oh yeah.
suddenly you start to recruit people to roles they shouldn't be in. They get, heavy imposter syndrome. It becomes painful for everyone else in the organization.
That goes back to like your question, Jack, about what would you do for the interview stage? Like, what would you ask them? What's good? What's bad? I think when it goes to like the third line level, that's when you get your 20 questions out.
Yeah.
Slap it on the table.
Yeah.
It's
You've got
less
20
about
minutes.
personality.
It is,
more
and you
about-
obviously need to have some kind of personality. I get that.
And I would
But
love,
then you would,
yeah. I mean, what we should be relying on is industry certifications at that point.
yeah.
And we should be saying, do you know what? We don't need to do these tests because these tests have been done by a third party. The issue, and by the way, the tests that you do, I mean, you've got to be really prescriptive about what kind of knowledge you're testing it. You know, I had an interview when I was younger, and one of the questions was, what are the 5 FSMO roles? And I'm there like, I know the answer because I've recently done Active Directory exam or whatever it was at that stage. So you do know it, but it's an irrelevant question. Like it is kind of like, hey, look, you got this from Microsoft training guide and put it in an exam. Pointless.
Lazy and poor, and probably done by a HR department that doesn't
Pretty much
know anything about that. And I felt the same. I remember when I came out of university and was applying for different grad schemes, every single one had specifically a numerical test, which was fairly difficult. And it was like, unless you want a load of maths people, you're already pre-selecting people out who could be, perfectly good fits, but aren't mathematicians applying for business related roles. So you have to be really sure that what you're testing is actually what is relevant and what you're looking for if you're going to go down that route.
Yeah. And I mean, in your instance they're outsourced, like almost psychometric tests that are run by a third party that HR have outsourced as a box ticking exercise. But what we're talking about is genuinely proving knowledge to do a role. But you have to prove that knowledge is not hypothetical knowledge, but scenario based. Can you do your job knowledge? And I think that's quite difficult to test for in 15 to 20 questions personally. I do like, I remember reading a while back that the guy who founded WordPress didn't do any interviewing up until they got to like 500 users or something. And his entire workflow was based on how people communicated with him via email, because that was the primary comms technology. And the entirety of how they would work with one another was based on that. So he'd just literally go, can you do this for me? And he'd find a really small segmented piece of work that would be able to be delivered in a couple of hours. And it would be like, can they ask for the information they need concisely? Can they communicate with me in a formal, professional manner and move this project from start to finish? And I don't think, the question you asked is, how did you do a good interview? And I don't really think that any interview can tell you everything that you need to know. So I think that in reality, the question should be, what else can you do other than interview that would show you that this is the right person for your organization?
Yeah, definitely. I think whenever we've got to the end of an interview round, I think we're always in a position that we're taking a punt, and it feels like there's much more that we could do, just generally, as you said earlier, as a general companies in society, to better evaluate at that assessment stage. And we probably still haven't cracked that. And I think, it's a challenge for us is to try and do better there, to try and make the candidate more comfortable, show their skills, make a more informed decision. So, because, there's a level of responsibility on us in putting the wrong candidate in a role. They might well be perfectly lovely person and they've applied for it and they've trusted that you'll only give them that job role if it's right for them. And you've derailed their career maybe in some ways if you haven't done those assessments properly.
I think so, but do you not then think that you're just inheriting every level of responsibility for everyone's lives that come across you in some way? Like, you have a clear job description that says this is what the expectations are. Someone by applying for that role is essentially saying, hey, look, I can deliver on those expectations. And then, there's a mutual decision, and it is a mutual decision that both of you want to proceed with that relationship. Yeah. I mean, I personally think the UK job market should move more towards being flexible, people in and out of jobs. It's not a big deal starting a new career, and, find the right place for you. Don't stick with what you've got. Think, can this be better? Can I have more of this? Can I have more of that? And if we're only ever making a recruitment decision when we're 100% sure that they're the right person, we're going to be hiring one person every 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. We end up taking a punt because you never truly know. And it probably goes back a bit to the recruiter point around you want as minimal risk on that decision as you possibly can. And probably your interview process, you're using the internal channels, all of those things. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is mitigate risk of failing on that employment. And it is a two-way thing. It is both you and the candidate.
But why does it matter if you failed?
It depends for what reason for me. If you failed because you didn't put out a role properly or understand what you're looking for, and you've asked somebody to come in who's then left a job where they maybe enjoyed it but wanted to do something new, or it knocks their confidence, like you said earlier in the chat we had originally, that matters. But if you're talking about it just didn't work out and they've gone on to a new role, they've enjoyed it, it's maybe less. But I do think, as you said, society at the moment is set up where it's a difficult job market. There's changes from the government that have already come in around trying to improve the security for people moving into new roles, but it does add risk to the employer. So there's various different reasons why that then becomes not completely risk-free. Just from a societal perspective, it's hard to get a new job. It's hard to go
when you did the interviews. How do you find it?
The
whole process.
Every time I sit in an interview, I feel kind of nervous for them because they're often so nervous because I know what position they're in and how difficult it is, and I sit there thinking, how can I make this easier? And I still don't have the answer for that. I still think it's intimidating sitting across from anybody that you employ, that you're trying to go for a job with. And it just feels like the most unnatural, uneasing setting there is. And, we're doing this podcast saying we don't have all the answers. We definitely don't have the answer on this. So if there is anybody watching that, has a really good structure from this, that isn't, too formalized, isn't, over the line in some of the aspects that we said, it'd be really great to hear that. One of the ideas that I had, which might be a terrible idea because it's only in my thinking over the last few days whilst we were discussing this subject, but it'd be quite cool to be able to get somebody in for a day, pay them a day rate for coming into your business, and just letting them sit with the team that they'd be working with and do some of shadowing with the work. I feel like that would be a more relaxed setting and a better way for us to assess somebody on how they work with that team, what was that team's feedback, and obviously pay them for their time of doing that, than it is this really intense, come and sit across from the conference room with me and tell me about your technical skill. It's almost like just setting up a more relaxed day of it could work better.
The weird part is in that scenario that like anyone who you pitch that idea to as a candidate would be like, God, this is a bit much, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, and you're like,
take a day holiday.
Yeah, all the things that come with it.
Yeah.
All the risk of employer finding out, everything else that comes. But in reality, your points about being able to evaluate them is obviously true, but we would also, they would also be able to evaluate us and the environment that it is. Of course, it'd be helpful, but for some reason, we have in our head that moving jobs is, on one hand, really difficult. Don't want to do it that often. I only want to do it when I've been pushed to my absolute limit, all of those things that come with it. But can I commit a day to go and sit there and work out whether what I want to do for the next 2 years is right for me? Nah, too much.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. we've talked a lot about culture. That's kind of come up across this episode and our culture. We did talk a little bit about that in the pilot, but is it worth just kind of recapping how we see our culture and why we think that attracts talent?
Integrity, personality. We're quite laid back here. We've got a nice pool table upstairs that you and I have battles on a daily basis. I think we just create an environment here that people actually want to come to work. That's what I feel anyway. When someone comes to work, look at Robbie when he came in, he was just mesmerised about how kind of laid back everyone is. And everyone still works hard. The pool table's not there to be used and abused. It's literally there for kind of I want a quick 10-minute break. Let's go upstairs, play some darts, whatever it might be. That's not the whole part of it. I think it's that we make it quite a kind of a relaxed kind of environment when it needs to be. And our door's always open. When you've got an issue, non-work related, we're here. It's not kind of, we're only here to do stuff with work. It's personal life as well.
Yeah, I think for me personally, it boils down to two things. And one is it 80,000 hours or 10,000 hours? 10,000 hours is how it takes to be good at something, isn't it?
Yeah.
And 80,000 is your working life? No.
Yeah, 10,000 is you can master something in 10,000
hours. I can't remember how many days is your working life, but I'll come back into that. So yeah, for me, it comes down to two things. One is you spend a large proportion of your life working, and to be able to give anyone purpose, progression, and ultimately they want to come to work and enjoy it. That's the biggest thing that our culture is set up to do. When we founded the business, I remember we had conversations whilst we were away and stuff, and it centered around that there was a desire from me personally, at least, to be able to help as many people as possible. And after being on the journey for 7 or 8 years now, I definitely have tightened that mission statement from being able to help everyone to being able to help those that want to help themselves. And our culture is not soft. You know, we've squeezed people out, and that hasn't been director-led, that's been people-led. I think like attracts like, and people want to work hard and they want to achieve and they want to be rewarded and they want all of those things. And when you have enough of those people, they don't want people who just want to come in and cruise. They don't want people who want to spend 4 hours a day on the pool table playing darts. And that's why you can offer all of those nice things, because they are aligned with you. And, you know, as we grow, our hardest challenge is going to be retaining that, making sure that we keep people who want all life has to offer. They want to put the effort in. And the biggest thing, you know, one of my best mates, he said his dad spent his life as a roofer. And he said, his dad said to him, I know this is a really long-winded story for you, but his dad said to him, you just need to go out and work as hard as you can and you'll get what you want from life. And his dad is in his mid-60s, still working for £140 a day, doing hard graft, hasn't got any money saved up, whatever. And he's recently married into a relatively wealthy family. And he goes, you can work as hard as you want, but if you're not going to demand the reward that comes with that hard work, you're going to get absolutely nothing, because life ain't going to give it to you. And for me, in the market that we work in, with the kind of people that we work in, they aren't necessarily inclined to demand the other half of it. And I see my responsibility as making sure that they get a fair piece of that cake, that their labour, their hard work, their graft builds, so that they're not in that position when they're in their mid-60s.
Yeah, I think it's a really nice way of putting it. And yeah, I actually, when you kind of look at things and read things about growing a good culture, it's actually been quite easy for us. We've just had to be authentic to who we are. It hasn't been that we don't have our values up on the wall screaming at everybody saying, aren't we this? They know what we are because we live and breathe in our actions what we are. And actually, when you distill that all down, it's not that complicated. If you are in it for the right reasons, doing the right things, that naturally oozes out. And it is hard to describe your own culture and what you've done well and what you haven't. But for me, if you boil it right back to its pure basics, it's we care. It's as simple as that. We care about people. I think that pretty much wraps up the main topic. And before we run out of time, we've got a couple of questions which I think have been teed up by our marketing exec for this episode.
Not brave enough to ask them outside of this.
Yeah, exactly. Just use this as an opportunity. But yeah, we'd love to hear more questions. So please get them in if you'd like to. But our questions for today are: over the last 2 years, we've grown 70% headcount. What are your views on that?
Me and Sam's always had this kind of, when we first started out, what do you want it to be in 5 years' time when we first started? I was like, I don't know, just like having like five kind of people. That's probably kind of nice. And then it's gone from that to what we are, like 17 people, wherever it is now. I think that's kind of come as a surprise. I didn't envision that to be that kind of massive growth, but we've embraced it, haven't we?
Yeah. I think that when you have an idea and you're confident in what you're doing, it just kind of happens naturally. And I don't think you and I were ever aligned on what that kind of journey looks like. I think you were always of the mindset that it would be under 10 users and it would be kind of this boutique that does X, Y, and Z. And I didn't see it that way. I saw it as
You wanted to grow it.
Yeah, and I still do.
Yeah,
I still do want to keep growing it.
Yeah.
And Jack has been like an integral missing piece to that initial vision for me. And I think something that I underrated. We got to a saturation point probably 18 months ago, maybe a little bit longer. And there was this clearly being stretched in too many places. Where do you commit your time? Have you got to learn a different skill set? All of those questions that came in. So I think the 70% growth from my perspective is highly attributable to what Jack's brought to the business.
Has it come as a surprise though? Did you think it grow 70%?
So no, we have the service, and we always will, to deliver whatever growth the business can generate for itself. That's the way I view it.
Yeah.
We have an abundance of technical ability that no one in our position will have. Like, we will be the most technical MSP probably in quite a large geographic region, to be honest with you. And DR's always put it as there's magic in it. I just don't know how to communicate it with someone else. And that still stands today. We could grow at 200%, 300%, and we would still manage it from a service perspective. We just haven't really cracked that other nut yet. And when we do, it'll be exponential.
So I think Alfie's view was that's quite a lot, but your answer is it's not enough. So his second question of do you think it's growing too quickly?
Oh, here we go. Here's the real question.
Quick answer: no.
I think too quickly depends on your business and what capacity you've got to deliver continually. If your service is getting stretched to the point you aren't delivering, I mean, it's going to eat you alive pretty quickly. But with our skill set and personality, we prioritize the things that we were good at from day dot.
Yeah.
And that is service delivery. Like, we've built integrations between our application suites. We've not taken anything off shelf that are marketed at MSPs because it's primarily marketed at the US market that doesn't work in the same way as the UK market. We've built our own blueprints, our own applications, even that enhance our clients' 365 environments. We've done so much legwork to get our service proposition to a scalable position. I genuinely think we could double, triple in the next 2-3 years, and we wouldn't struggle on a service perspective.
I think that's a really good point, because I think what's coming out to me there is that somebody like Alfie, who's come in over the last year or so, sees a what looks like a rapidly growing business, but actually for us all now, that's a long time in the making, and it's the first signs of growth, not this is getting ahead of ourselves or anything like that. It's like, these are the first signs of growth. Let's keep kicking it on, because we have all, like you said, done all the legwork, and the capability is there for this to grow. And that's down to how you manage the business at the start. You built a service and a product that can stand on its own 2 feet before you worried about generating oodles of growth. And I think that yeah, go on, Sam.
No, I was literally just about to say that I think the biggest And I know the growth number that you've given was 70%, which was based on staff. And I don't know what the turnover is 2 year. Like I know the year on year, but I don't know what the turnover is on 2.
It's about the same percentage.
It's about the same.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, while that year on year growth is what it is, I don't think all growth is built equally. And I think we could grow so much quicker if we dropped our price point to where our competitors often are. We could grow our turnover massively. We could grow our headcount massively by recruiting apprentices and going down that route. So I'm proud to say like the 70% growth has been in our image, and we haven't reneged on what we set out to do. We've said, this is the market we want to operate in. And, you know, when you build a service proposition that demands a price point that's a premium within your market, which is ultimately what we're doing, like you have to then have a sales and marketing engine that reflects that. Because, you know, if you want to go and deliver bargain basement IT at a much lower price point where you've got apprentices and whatever, you can then send in, you know, one person who's going to sell the world and not deliver anything. And everyone goes, well, you know, it's bargain basement, so it is what it is. And we're all going to live in this environment where everyone hates each other because you're not delivering, but you're not paying to deliver and all of those things. Yeah. So I think from my perspective, the thing that makes me most proud is we set out to build a premium product. We completely overlooked that premium has to run through the business. You know, it then has to be a premium sales engine. It then has to be a premium marketing engine. It then has to be premium staff, whatever. We missed all of those components, but we still made it work, and we still are growing in that image. Yeah. Like if you want to go and find one of our competitors who does a third of what we do for 20% less, i.e. the value doesn't stack up anyway, be my guest.
Yeah, and I mean, we probably segue in a bit, but I think that's quite a good way to end the episode actually, because next month we'll be talking about sales and marketing and the engine that we're trying to build there and what's been successful in actually getting the business up and running from that perspective. But yeah, I think that summarizes the questions that we had and the topic on finding the right talent. So please do like and subscribe, drop comments below, all of those kind of things, because we'd love to hear from you. Love to include it in the future episodes. But thank you for listening, and see you next time.